What's good, y'all? It's Drew here, back with another collab video. Today we have a very special guest, but why don't you introduce yourself, Brody?
What's up everyone, I'm the one and only Zage, and as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, it's going to be a very interesting subject, so let's get to it.
So today, if you didn't already get it, we talk about Shanks versus Mihawk. Now, these two guys, they've been being comparisons damn near chapter 1. So we here to give our our 2 cents and to finally talk about who we think will win in the fight. So for this video, it's separated between 3 sections. So we have feats, narratives, and we have to tackle if that boy Shanks is a swordsman. So we gonna get right into it, honestly. Yeah, so we can kind of jump right into feats and stuff. And I think for feats, honestly, I think this a lot of this can go. We'll talk mostly about Shanks because if you watch One Piece, obviously you know. Between the two, that guy Shanks has a little bit more feats, so I think we should kind of discuss that. Zage, what do you think the biggest feat we should like just discuss, or like one of the most important feats?
So obviously I would say that when you're first actually watching the series, the earliest feat that you can really look to for Shanks, aside from scaring a sea beast, would be his clash with Whitebeard. Them two split in the sky. Obviously Whitebeard didn't use his devil fruit, but that showcase was essentially the power of what two yonkos clashing would look like, right? So that was kind of like a good introductory feat for what Shanks is supposed to be. But I would actually look to more so what we've actually seen more recently in the story, right? Where he one-shotted someone like Kid, who actually had help from Killer, actually trying to mitigate the damage from the divine departure that Shanks sent at Kid, and they were both one shot. In fact, Kid was actually dying after that divine departure hit him, and what makes his feat so crazy is that Kid actually fought alongside Law against Big Mom, was able to endure a lot of her attacks, but one attack from Shanks, an advanced conqueror slash, was able to knock him out, even though Killer was actually trying to help him, right? Which is an amazing feat, right? So I think that's actually a good place to start. But do you have anything to add when it comes to Shanks's feats?
Yeah, nah, for sure. So for the Shanks thing with the Kid, it's actually crazy because I think that it's funny because we see Shanks and the Blackbeard that kind of gets mirrored towards each other, where we know Kid and Law kind of relative. They fought Big Mom, who's a Yonko. Like both Blackbeard and Shanks kind of one-shot their opponents who were pretty close in strength. Oda goes out of his way to kind of, I think he said he would be Shanks, or Shanks is the gold child. Like he low-key glazes Shanks to it a crazy amount, and we kind of see it with that. So like, if we're talking about feats, like Mihawk doesn't really have anything to hold up to that. Like Shanks one-shotting a person that's like, let's say, baby Yonko tier or something, like maybe half of a Yonko, because we saw it took him and Law to beat Big Mom. So like Shanks is crazy powerful, because even like you said, it wasn't just Kid, it was also Kid and Killer, and he still one-shot them. So that shit's insane. Another thing that we have to talk about with Shanks, like I feel like people get on us if we didn't, will be the Green Bull scene. So I know you're probably a little bit more supportive of Green Bull than I am, but that nigga Green Bull was disappointing. Like, and I guess Shanks is hard and stuff, and he kind of made like, he did kind of attack Green Bull from like the sneak attack kind of thing, but it's just like Shanks also has that scene too, where he kind of like presses out a Yonko, presses out an Admiral, kind of makes that guy run away. So I ain't gonna lie, we have him doing almost a Yonko level tier feat, and then he has like the Admiral thing. So those two feats are really crazy for Shanks. Honestly, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I do agree with you in terms of your general sentiment when it comes to Shanks doing what he did against Green Bull. Obviously, to show Green Bull a little bit of grace, Green Bull was caught off guard, and we know based on what Josu said about Shanks's Conqueror's haki when he actually went onto Whitebeard's ship, that if you're not prepared for it, that there'll be like negative consequences if you're actually prepared to stand up against Shanks' Conqueror's haki, as well as actually just being generally strong. That's why the weak ones were told to step back. Green Bull actually being affected by Shanks' Conqueror's haki, even though that he was off guard, is still an amazing feat for Shanks. It actually says a lot about his power and how the portrayal difference between him and Green Bull are in terms of power, right? And you can say, and this isn't a Green Bull video, but Green Bull still said that he was willing to go, fight against the Redhead Pirates at some point, just not at that given time, considering he was going there to take in and capture Luffy, and obviously Shanks protected Luffy. He doesn't want to get into the middle of a situation where he's between two emperors, right? But this is not a Green Bull video, this is about Shanks. So yeah, that's just really truly the takeaway for Shanks, and there's not really much to add when it comes to that, to to be fair, right?
Yeah, so yeah, Shanks. I mean, I ain't gonna lie. If we doing straight off like feats, Shanks might Loki have it beat. I can't lie to you. Like
Yeah,
that is, I think that's one of those big things with Shanks where it's like you gotta give him his respect, right? I think we can even touch upon the Marineford scene because I think Marineford also has Shanks looks really really well, or it kind of gives him a lot of like support and things like that. Because we have it at the end of the war when Shanks pulls up and Shanks is like, "Yo," and I don't really know if you want to do if you want to have this as a feat or Shanks pulling up to Marineford and he's like, "Yo, if y'all want to keep fighting, fight me." Now, I'm not saying that Shanks could have beaten everyone in Marineford. I'm not even saying
definitely
that.
not. Yeah,
But what I
definitely
am
not.
saying, yeah, but what I am saying is that it is a testament to his strength that people were like, oh shit, Shanks is mad. Or even look at it like Blackbeard. Blackbeard has, two fruits, probably the strongest Logi and the strongest Paramecia. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Fighting Shanks, that's not my body yet. So we have to, that's some support and some respect we have to put on Shanks' name. But this isn't a Shanks only video. We have to talk about Mihawk's feats as well. I just want to tackle the whole thing with Jozu that it's not really an anti-feat because I know people are, oh my god, Jozu blocked the attack. But one, me and Zage we kind of talk about this a little off video. One thing to note is I think it was in one of the data. It was one of the data books or his. I think it said his durability is next to none. Like this guy is durable as hell. Like
Yeah.
honestly, from what we've seen in the series, no one has actually broke the diamond. Like I know Aokiji froze it and hit it, but that's not breaking the diamond straight up. Diamonds is a crazy thing, but also at the same time we have characters in the series like for instance when Zoro beat Mr. One. He was like, "What's next, diamond?" And Zoro doesn't say no. Zoro says,
Yeah,
"If I
that'd be
basically
a
he's like if I
waste.
need
Yeah.
to," and that it'd be a waste. And basically, what to say, we know that Zoro's teacher is talking about all about like the breath of all things, and like cutting what you need to cut and not cutting what you don't need to cut. So like honestly, just looking at it that way, it's like that nigga Mihawk, if he can cut diamond, he's low key the goat. But what do you think on Mihawk straight like feats? Like what do you think feats? For,
Yeah,
for
so
Mihawk?
when it comes to Mihawk's feats, I mean, they I wouldn't say like they're great to be fair. Definitely his narrative definitely supports him more than what his feats do. Like you just spoke about, for example, Jozu, him being able to block his slash. Yeah, you did explain that well about how the breath of all things does affect, how Mihawk wasn't able to cut Jozu. But Jozu in his own right is very tough, like you mentioned about how in the Vivid card is mentioned that he has unparalleled toughness. Now, even if you want to say that's exaggerated, description of Jozu, Diamond itself in the story we know is as tough as Kairoseki or Sea Stone, and we know things like Whitebeard's Quake was actually, dampened by Sea Stone, right? In terms of like, it wasn't actually able to like fully break it. So, there's that. There's also the fact that in Marineford we saw Mr. One protect Luffy from one of Mihawk's slashes and he was able to block it. But then after he actually changed his, his tune or the breath of his sword to iron, he was able to cut Mr. One. So that same principle is definitely very important to note when we're thinking about someone like Jozu, and he is diamond, which is even harder than iron and steel. And if you want to look at it from a real world perspective, it's literally the hardest substance, like the hardest material, right? So if it requires the breath of all things to cut something like iron, then it would obviously need to do it would also be the same for something like diamond, right? There's also obviously the Vista fight. Now the Vista thing, people control about it and say, look, he went equal with Vista or whatever, but I don't really think it's an anti-feat. I think people that have a lot of common sense know that's not an anti-feat. Mihawk just wasn't really going all out, and to be fair, nothing in Marineford was really a representation of Mihawk going all out, to be quite honest with you, because we know that Vista is weaker than Marco, who rivals King, that Zoro was able to handily defeat after he learned Advanced Conqueror's Haki. So and Zoro is still ways away until he can actually beat someone like Mihawk or even fight on his level. So it just goes to show that everything that happened in Marineford isn't necessarily a representation of Mihawk's full power. And I do think that when we're actually talking about how strong Mihawk is, I wouldn't say that feats is necessarily the angle to go on. It's more so the narrative, which is going to be the next thing that we talk about, right?
Yeah, but narrative is a little bit better. I think honestly, funny enough, Shanks also has a crazy narrative, and I think we can tackle him first. I kind of said this already, but Oda be glazing Shanks. We already noticed. Like when Shanks pulled up on Whitebeard, they clash. And shout out I think it was shout out Jozu. That nigga Jozu was funny. Shout out him. He was like, oh, So I think he's like, oh no, the clouds themselves, like he's literally slicing. Oh, when two Yonko clash, we see the sky split, and we see later on how big of a deal that is. Like that's really two Yonko level people. Like that's some crazy shit, and I think that goes to speak towards Shanks's narrative, like how powerful he is. And obviously we know Marineford is all about slicing Whitebeard. Like we see Sengoku says multiple times, oh, that's the strongest man in the world. He has the power to destroy the world, and that's a guy that Whitebeard that Shanks pulled up on, and like it seemed like they were clashing. So that's pretty impressive with Shanks and along those lines, and obviously. Even looking at things like this is his first mate, but Ben Beckman pulls a gun on Kizaru, and then Kizaru's like, I'm chilling. Like those are pretty good, I think, narrative points to Shanks. But funny enough, and I think you might agree with me, I think Mihawk's case is better than Shanks. It's funny, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that because, and obviously this would actually like follow on to the last section really, which is about if Shanks is a swordsman or not, because I do think that the narrative of Mihawk and Shanks, they're very closely like tied together. It's kind of hard to talk about Shanks's narrative by itself in isolation without mentioning Mihawk, and vice versa with Mihawk, you know, isolated narrative and not talking about Shanks. I would say a little bit more with Mihawk than it was with Shanks, but you know, regardless, they're definitely very important because back in the day they were once rivals, right? So as we learned from Whitebeard, they had a rivalry. They used to duel, basically, you know, daily duels. They had several of them, and they're basically unresolved duels, right? And ever since Shanks lost his arm, essentially Mihawk lost interest in Shanks, and you know, lost interest in fighting him, you know, because of the fact that he lost an arm, right? And I do think that when it comes to Shanks and Mihawk, essentially the narrative is that they're very, very close in power at that time, you know, more than, or you know, 12 years ago before he lost his arm, they were on, you know, level playing field. But now it seems like things are different, right? Now it seems like Mihawk doesn't really care to fight Shanks, and you know, he's now stamped as the world's strongest swordsman. Okay, so that's definitely you know, a strong narrative point to go to. It's also actually stated in Mihawk's Bible card that, you know, Mihawk's actually able to see more than just the swordsmanship of those that stand before him, but he's actually able to see their true power. And we do see that Mihawk actually do this on a number of occasions, because being able to sense someone's strength is actually a subsection of observation haki. For example, when Rayleigh went to Ruskaina with Luffy, and he was able to sense all the beasts that were on the island and say, yep, these beasts are all stronger than you, right? That's a use of observation haki to determine someone's strength, and we've seen Mihawk do this very accurately. Like for example in Baratie, even before, you know, fighting Zoro, he was able to tell that he was a weakling and nowhere near his level. He was able to tell that Whitebeard had fallen off when he was saying that, you know, it's merely conjecture, but the difference between that man and the rest of us is rather small. He was able to tell the true power of Luffy beyond his combat capabilities, about how he has the power to, you know, galvanize people and to make them on their side. So we know that Mihawk's actually a very good judge of other people's power, and you know, him saying that he's basically lost interest in a one-armed man in Shanks, who some people try to cope, and I will say cope, to be quite honest with you, because I do think it is, because it's not substantiated by the narrative, but people will make it out like Shanks kind of had to find another way of fighting after he lost an arm, which isn't really implied, right? He's still a swordsman. We see his divine departure, it sliced the damned punk, it cut Kid, you know, so it's nothing like out of the ordinary when it comes to Shanks's narrative and how, you know, that should be superseded Mihawk in any particular way. And you know, as far as we know, it just seems like once upon a time when they were dueling, you know, they were equal. Maybe there was literally no difference in their strength. And then after Shanks lost an arm, now Mihawk is just the strongest swordsman, right? And that's not to say that Mihawk and Shanks didn't grow stronger after the 12 years. It's more so to say that the gap in power now between Mihawk and Shanks is a little bit wider than it was comparatively to, you know, 12 years ago, right? That's how I see it. But you got anything more to add to that?
It's actually funny. I didn't even, that's actually a point I never even thought about, the whole, you know, knowing a person's like strength according to observation haki. I think we get kind of some scenes of that. Like first, I think like to your point, Rayleigh again like uses it. Rayleigh also says, "Oh, I don't think I could beat Blackbeard." I think he says that in the last couple of chapters a while ago. But so that is a point that I think that Mihawk kind of saw. And he's like, "Damn." And Mihawk kind of saw him and he's like, okay, this guy isn't as strong as I am. You know what I'm saying? I think that is a thing that kind of could be talked about. And as well, we can kind of jump onto the last point. Like if that guy Shanks is a swordsman, because let's just be honest, bro. The biggest narrative the biggest narrative example on why Mihawk is stronger than Shanks is something that we've been told in the story mad times. The world's strongest swordsman. Like, you Google it out, like, well, who's the world's strongest swordsman in One Piece? You're getting that nigga dracule Mihawk. Like, you're getting his name. That's just a fact. And that's the narrator said it. It's just a thing. And it's kind of funny because we have had characters that use swords or use sharp weapons that aren't swordsmen, like Mr. One, King, like those are those people. And I think one big difference we kind of notice, and you can kind of talk about it afterwards, is the devil fruit, right? Mr. One has a sword fruit or whatever it's called, the blade fruit, and then King has the whole, like, we know he has devil fruit as well. So it's like, I think if you have a devil fruit, you kind of have that out of, we see how you fight without it. And even like King, when he used his sword shot missiles, or like, blade. It was a lot of funky shit. Like that nigga Shanks, and as we see, Shanks is a non-devil fruit user. Like, he doesn't have that. He uses an actual sword, so he's not like Garp or something, or even like Big Mom, who has a sword but doesn't use it that often. Like Shanks, every time we've seen him fight, his sword has been the first thing he uses, right? So that's the thing. I think we also talk about this off stream as well. Whitebeard even says, oh yeah, your fights were legendary. And whether it's one fight or multiple fights isn't really important. The whole point is that it's been said multiple times that Shanks and Mihawk train, basically they fought against each other with, fights to the death, training their testing each other's swordsmanship. So it's like Shanks, like, it wouldn't make sense for Shanks to be a non-swordsman testing himself in a battle of swordsmanship against the person who's trying to be the world's strongest swordsman. And then later on, Mihawk, who's the person who has that goal, is the world's strongest swordsman in the current day. He clearly was strong at that time and is still stronger. You know what I'm saying? So that's obviously, I think that's what the main point is. I know some people might argue. And shout out I'm gonna probably put it on a little bit on. I'll probably put it on screen for a little bit. It's a funny scene with Naruto and Pain kind of remixed, talking about why Mihawk's over Shanks, and it's like, niggas be calling Shanks a hockey man. That's nasty work, because if we're talking about a quote unquote hockey man, the only nigga you have is like Garp or something. You know what I'm saying? Who uses only hockey? Because in the new world, we all know in the new world, everyone uses hockey. It's like up there with breathing. Like Kaido even said it. You can't conquer shit unless you have hockey. So yeah, I mean, I guess the whole point of the whole question is, like, is Shanks a hockey man, or is he a swordsman? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely do think he is a swordsman. And another thing to add to what you were saying as well is when Brand New talked about Mihawk's bounty, right? He said that he has greater sword skill than even that of the Emperor Red Hair Shanks, right? Now, what is the point? What is the point of hyping up Mihawk's swordsmanship to say it's the best by saying it's better than someone who is not a swordsman? Like, you have to put it from that perspective. There would be no point in Oda writing what he wrote if Shanks isn't a swordsman. It's like saying, oh, Shanks, Mihawk is the greatest swordsman, he's the strongest swordsman because he has greater sword skill than Kaido. Well, obviously, I mean, the guy's not a swordsman. I mean, it doesn't really say much to Mihawk, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't really even make sense. Like, why would you mention Kaido? That's just so out of context. Like, why would Kaido even be used to compare Mihawk's swordsmanship or to hype on Mihawk's swordsmanship? Because the guy's not a swordsman. Makes sense, right? And the reason why Shanks was used is obviously because he was obviously a rival to Mihawk, and he is a swordsman. It's just that simple, really and truly. It wouldn't really make much sense for Oda to make Mihawk's rival someone that's not a swordsman. It's even stated in the Vivid cards, right, that Mihawk and Shanks competed ruthlessly over their swordsmanship skills. That's actually stated. So, there's just a lot of things in the narrative and like in supplementary material that just suggest that Mihawk and Shanks are both swordsmen, and obviously we know that Mihawk is just the strongest one, right? You brought up about King and Das Bones before, but I'm not saying it's impossible for sword wielders to not be categorized as swordsmen, but the thing is that really and truly that standard is completely dependent on Oda's own opinion, and he can just pick and choose what sword wielder is a swordsman and what sword wielder isn't, right? We're more so saying with Shanks, like, based on the current information, what is more likely to be true, right? And what more likely is to be true is that he is a swordsman rather than someone like King. If someone is like a sword wielder like King, right, and they're not a swordsman, then Oda will make that very clear. But since that actually hasn't happened yet, then there's no reason to assume that he would be a sword wielder, or a sword user, not a swordsman, until further notice. And that's kind of how I look at it. It just wouldn't make sense with the prior information, right? other than that, like kind of like what I was saying earlier, people usually like to say the whole thing about how, you know, he was compensating for an arm, and you know, he used to be a swordsman until he lost the arm, so he had to compensate that for something else like haki or whatever, or switched up a style. But we literally see him using Roger's fighting style. Like he's using divine departure, he's using Roger's swordsmanship basically, or sword skill, right, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, he's using his sword of name attacks, and Roger didn't have any, you know, like nerfs, like, you know, only having one arm, and he's using Roger's technique. So it's not as if the guy actually you know, compensated for any like a completely different fighting style. If the guy started kickboxing, then, you know, maybe like you know, maybe they will have a conversation there, but it seems like it's just very bog standard sword play, right? Like you said earlier as well about the whole haki man thing, that's what usually people say about, you know, Conqueror's haki being what was substituted. But we even see with Zoro and Wano that, you know, he literally developed a sword style based on advanced Conqueror's haki. The King of Hell sword style is a sword style that was created on Zoro's advanced Conqueror's haki. Put it from that perspective. So if a sword style could be created based on advanced Conqueror's haki, then I guess, you know, this haki style thing, the haki man thing, it just doesn't really have any legs to stand on, right? So I think in totality, the most simple conclusion is probably the case until further notice. You know, it's a bit of a reach to suggest that Shanks isn't a swordsman just so you can say he is stronger than Mihawk, to be honest, right? That's just how I see it, right?
I'm curious to know in the comments what people say. People who have, like, if you have Shanks over Mihawk, what is your argument? I think that's a big thing, because I'm not gonna lie, I used to be pro Shanks. I used to have Shanks over Mihawk, but then I just felt like you had to jump over so many hoops and you know, make so many jumps in logic for it to make sense. You know what I'm saying? It just seems like it's less arguments for Mihawk to be over Shanks. Now, let us know what you guys think down below in the comments. If you have Shanks over Mihawk over Shanks, if you think it's a crazy tie, yeah. But Zage, do you have any videos you want to plug, anything like that?
Yes, actually, funnily enough, you know, we're talking about Mihawk and Shanks, but the latest video as of this recording is a Mihawk one, going into more detail about Mihawk and, you know, everything that we know in the story. So if you want more details on that, go check that out. That would be much appreciated. The next one is going to be a Blackbeard one in a similar style to the one I made, the Mihawk one. So, you know, if you appreciate that type of content, if you want to see my opinions on it, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, Drew. You know, and
you know how it is, Zage. It's the homie. I'm saying we had to catch up for a minute. But yeah, check out Zage's channel. Y'all know how it is. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that to both channels, obviously. But yeah, that's it. But we're out, so peace.
Take care.